You're listening to the Tune Tribe podcast.
Good evening, good morning. Welcome to the Tune Tribe podcast. I had with me, sitting here today, the legendary and what an amazing... I'm so looking forward to hearing your voice when it's recorded, Wendy. This is Wendy James, who used to be, for those of you who don't know, she used to be the singer in a band called Transvision Vamp, who sold hundreds of thousands of records in the late 80s. Millions of records in the late 80s, early 90s.
To nitpick, but
Millions of records. Well, in those days, that was
it was possible.
if you were a successful band, that's what happened. Very rare these days. So, she has got a story to tell and a brand new album to talk about, which I think is fantastic. I'm so pleased and proud to have you on the show. Welcome, Wendy James.
I'm really happy to be here.
Listen to that voice. Can you say it again? Say hello again.
I'm really
It's
happy
brilliant.
to be
It's just like it's like a sort of a legendary voice. So Wendy, but the normal thing I do at the start of these podcasts is I ask the guest if they can remember the first record they bought, just to get a bit of context. Not that we need a lot of context for you, but I think it would be interesting.
I'm pretty certain that the first... I did have a little record player, and I did have records from about the age of 2 years old, but they were obviously little singles that my parents had bought me to just fascinate me with.
Right.
But I think the first time I actually put my hand into my pocket money to buy music,
Yes.
I'm pretty sure it was Blondie's Heart of Glass.
Now, can you remember the...
Maybe it was Plastic Letters. I know that... Which is the one where she's sitting on the car bonnet?
Oh, that's Plastic Letters. Yes. So,
is that what I said?
And that's the album. That's an album, isn't it?
Is that the one with Rip Her to Shreds?
Yes.
Okay, so that was my first...
Okay, and the one with, I think,
Whereas Heart of Glass
Denis is on it as well, isn't it? Yeah. So that was, that would have been sort of...
Yeah, Plastic Letters, her on the car bonnet.
Yeah.
With her high-heeled pumps.
Fantastic sleeve. And there are a bit more new wave than Heart of Glass, a little bit more leaning towards the kind of the punk Blondie rather than...
I'd never seen... I mean, you see Marilyn Monroe, everything, when you're young, but I'd never seen a more edgy blonde until Debbie Harry came along. Plus, she was surrounded by her gang of men.
Yes.
And it was just a fascinating, without even really knowing what the music particularly would sound like, it was a fascinating picture. Obviously, it had all started filtering through to me, the punk scene, but I obviously... I'm not that... at that time, I was very young.
Yes.
So I wasn't fully informed. I suppose just my radar and my instinct was guiding me to a place.
Do you remember the
I know that my dad had to drive me to the record shop.
I was going to say, how did you get there? He drove you to the record shop. Did he wait outside?
At that time, I lived in a little village outside of a medium-sized town. And that medium-sized town had one independent record store. And so... he had to drive me in on a Saturday morning with my pocket money. I do remember that.
Bless him. And whereabouts was this? Can you tell us?
This was in a town called Lewes.
Okay, in Sussex.
Yeah.
Okay.
Famous for its prison. No, it's Crown Court. There's one of the top Crown Courts there.
Right, we must visit. We must go there.
Anne of Cleves' house.
Okay.
I think that's Henry VIII's wife that had too many fingers.
And so she had to go, obviously.
So she didn't last long,
No.
but so he bequeathed her that house, but apparently she never actually bothered living there.
Yeah, well, she probably couldn't. She was couldn't find the
fingers
keys.
And we don't mean to offend anyone with more than...
no, obviously. Multi-digited listeners
so there's
need
Anne
not
of
be
Cleves'
offended.
house, the Crown Court, and there is Lewes Prison. There's also a couple of good schools around there, and a lot of... also a lot of kind of Aleister Crowley kind of thing was down the road in Hastings, his black magic stuff. And a lot of that, it didn't really affect my life, but one is aware that down there in the coves of Sussex, there is a little leftover of black magic.
Wow.
But I was just watching Olivia Newton-John in Grease, and then getting my mind blown by Debbie Harry.
By Debbie Harry, yeah. So this was like
Not
late
much time for black magic.
1970s, a fantastic period for pop music.
For young teenage girls.
Yeah, absolutely. So after that, school, and quite quickly, because I believe you were still a teenager at the
16.
time, you formed a band, your own band.
Yeah. Because I had started the process of rebelling really sped up quite quickly in my 15th and 16th years.
Okay.
And I had been on track to do, higher education and be a proper middle-class girl. And
you disappointed your poor dad waiting outside the record shop.
I can actually pinpoint it back to Greece, where Olivia turns into the bad Olivia.
Yes.
At the end.
In the shiny trousers.
And I started shortening the length of my school uniform. And obviously, at the same time, the Clash and the Pistols, and my radar was getting prodded. So in those 2 years, it sped up very quickly, and I knew that I was not going to be studying mathematics and quantum physics and all that stuff.
What did you enjoy at school, if you don't mind me asking?
Particularly English literature.
I was going to say, if you mentioned quantum physics, I thought for a moment that you had been going down that route.
I was fairly able in all the subjects, and so naturally teachers try and stream you into the most unimaginative but job-worthy.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So, and just like, I know my old boyfriend said that he wanted to be a rock and roll guitarist. Mm-hmm. When you have to do your job, what are you going to be when you grow up? Job counselling, whatever that meeting.
Careers advice.
Careers
yes,
advice.
Yes.
And I know my old boyfriend said rock and roll guitarist, and I know that I said pop star for sure.
Right.
So
what did they say back to you?
Blank face.
So they didn't say, well, we've got a vacancy.
Yes, exactly.
Transvision Vamp, they're called.
So, that year I left school, whereas I should have stayed on until 18. I did actually kind of trade off and enter the local college to do my A-levels in English literature and sociology and drama. But then really hardly turned up for that stuff, although I did still get my A-level in English literature.
Good for you.
But it was a bit of a busk. And and I'd started going into the nearby town called Brighton and met Nick Sayer, who looked like one of the New York Dolls / Keith Richards.
Yes.
And there was no.
This was your foil in the band to be.
There was. It wasn't even a question. It was. He said, "I'm looking for a singer," and I said, "I can sing."
Did you know? Did you know you could sing, or were you bluffing it at that point?
I was in the school choir and I was doing instruments and also, which is not much different to how I am now. If my instinct tells me the opportunity is there, I usually say yes and worry about it later. So
it served you well.
Yeah.
I'm glad you obviously did this with the podcast as well, which is nice.
I had no idea.
Good decision.
So and that's what we did. We spent some months making a demo, and then you can guide me through what you want to know. The rest is history.
Yeah, the rest is history. Absolutely, yeah. So I mean, for those who are unaware of Transvision Vamp, 3 fantastic albums, two of which were huge sellers, top 10 singles, not just in the UK, but I think there was a chart record in
the second
US.
album, Velveteen, went to #1 in 10 countries.
In 10 countries.
And the third album, which was our, undoing in the UK, the third album was the one that started really cementing us in America. Mm-hmm. But then Fatigue.
Remind me of the title of that. Little
Magnets versus the Bubble of Babel.
Little Magnets versus the Bubble of Babel.
Which was Nick's way of saying some things are meant to be and some things repel each other. Mm-hmm. People and fate.
Yeah.
Not him and me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just the arc of a pop band.
Of course.
And compounded by enormous overwork from a major record label. We saw no option but to split up. There was never an option to take a year off and enjoy the fruits of our labours.
It's so often the case, isn't it, that caught up in the sort of rush hour traffic of being a successful band, you don't get the chance to think logically and just step off.
If I had been the manager, I would have said, listen, you guys are burnt. Take a year, don't even go near a studio. Read some books, go and lie on a beach, do whatever you want to do, spend some of your money. And when you do start feeling the itch to make music, then we'll come back to it. But no one said that. So Nick and I were on an American tour, and we just said, we'll just have to split this up. Can't do it anymore. And that's why it ended, really.
Now, here's a question, and we actually had some people, Tune Tribe listeners, posing this question. It was a question I was going to ask anyway, and it's about your next move. I believe how long? I don't know how the hiatus was, but you just wrote to Elvis.
That was during that American tour.
Right.
Because it was a 5-week American tour, and somewhere down the middle, Nick and I kind of had decided that on the last date we would call it quits. And during that time, we did a residency in Hollywood, which meant we were holed up in a hotel there for about 8 days, and it was a hotel that lots of other bands stayed in. And earlier that year, we had played with, or not with him, but we'd co-headlined with him at a festival in Ireland.
Just to be clear, this is Elvis Costello.
Yeah, Elvis Costello. Yeah. And in a kind of youthful, maybe slightly naive way, Elvis, to me at that time, seemed to personify something more serious and meaningful, something with more substance than what I felt I was doing in Transvision Vamp.
Okay.
And so I'd enjoyed his performances. It's when he was doing the Spike album.
That's right, yeah.
And I bumped into Pete Thomas, the drummer from The Attractions, in the bar of the hotel we were staying in. And I'd had a couple of drinks, and I just said, "Do you think Elvis would do anything?" And Pete said, "Well, why don't you write him?" So that night on Sunset Marquee Stationery, I just went, "Dear Elvis, I might be leaving my band. I'm not totally confident to be completely on my own yet. Would you like to help me?"
Yeah.
And I didn't have a yes or a no back from him, but when I arrived back in London after this American tour, there literally was a cassette on my doormat, and he had actually, for the first time, reformed the whole of the lineup of The Attractions, because they hadn't spoken to each other for years.
That's right, they had not been playing, that's true.
And he got them together and did a rough demo, 1, 2, 3, 4, of however many songs are on that album, I can't remember. And then he said...
Well, I think, as memory serves me, there are about 12 or 13 songs, aren't there? It's a proper full-length album. This is Now Ain't the Time, for Your Tears, which is, I still listen to it. It's a great record. It's a really, genuinely great record.
And that was a whole nother life. I got paid a lot of money for that. And
good.
Instead
of I never thought you did.
I
so
only
that's
got
good,
to keep it
to
for half an hour.
Okay.
Don't get too excited. I held the check for half an hour, and then it was spent by other interested parties.
Oh, not spent by you?
No.
Oh.
That's the music business, baby.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
So the whole thing, and I wanted to get off MCA Records, which is where Transvision Vamp had been. And it's funny because I'd got the cassette from Elvis back in London. We'd just got off our 12-hour flight or whatever from LA. And I rebooked a British Airways return flight back to LA with Elvis's cassette in my pocket. And I marched into the CEO of MCA, who at that time his name was Al Teller, and said, "Listen, I think you're great," because he was one of the old school managing director types.
Yeah, and he's got one of those classic old school
He was
American
at Sony.
record label names.
I'd met him years ago at Sony, and I said, "I think you're great, Al, but I just can't do it for MCA any longer. I've given you 8 years of my life. I want it back," kind of thing. And he said, "Well, we're not completely. You've been making quite good sales for us. We're not completely ready to just wish you luck." So he said, "But what we have done is now under the Universal umbrella, we also own Geffen Records. So for your new reborn identity..."
Polygram, wasn't it, in those days, probably, wasn't it more?
No, it was MCA bought Geffen, basically.
Oh, okay.
Universal bought Geffen.
Right, okay.
And so they flipped me out. So the money train still ended back at the same accountant's office, basically. But I had my autonomy once more on Geffen with a whole new team around me. And, at that time, everyone just thought, well, she sells records and Costello sells records. What can go wrong? And then we didn't sell any.
Maybe too sophisticated for the market you created. I don't know. Going back to your original thought about Elvis Costello, perhaps it was, too much of a jump.
More philosophically, I just think, it doesn't have to be true in Justin Bieber land, but at a certain level, music fans can detect when something is forced. I can hear it on records. You can hear that kind of a real energy when a record, it may not even be played properly, but there's an energy of honesty.
Yeah.
and that's what's kind of visceral, and as clever, and which is the appropriate word, as clever as the Elvis Costello album was, I don't think it had innocent soul in it. Just because it was a manufactured idea.
Yeah.
The inception of the idea was completely genuine, me saying, please help me. But then it took on a more kind of a calculated journey with all the people involved with it. And somewhere along the line, I lost my passion for that record. I finished it, and I did it to the best of my abilities. But you can't say it's wholly a Wendy James record.
Right. There's a huge ballad on it, which I think was the second single actually, called "Do You Know?"
Yeah.
How's
what
it?
I'm saying.
Do you know what I'm saying? Which I think that's
It's
got
beautiful.
real honesty
and
gutsy
listening back, there's
delivery.
another one called Basement Kiss.
Yes.
Which I think is stunning,
Yeah.
beautiful, but some of the more punky, poppy, London's brilliant.
Maybe a little bit.
It was derivative of The Clash and Elvis knowing that I lived in West London and knew those guys, and I
Maybe
don't know.
a bit arch, possibly.
It was a bit clever.
I liked
It was a
it.
bit clever of him. But
So
I remain grateful, and as I say, with a bit of distance, some of those songs I really do think are great now.
do you play? You just played last night at the in 2 venues in London.
Yeah, we
do you
didn't play any of the Elvis.
play any of the? You playing all the songs off this new one?
No,
Are you?
it's primarily the new one, a smattering of other solo songs that I've done,
Okay.
and a handful of Transvision Vamp.
Okay. Now, just to take us up to the current album, which is coming out in just under a week's time, the price of
The ticket.
the ticket. I always want to say the price of admission, the price of the ticket, which is taken from a book title. Am I right in saying?
Yeah. It's James Baldwin is
Yes.
a very famous black American
Fantastic writer. Yeah.
culture-changing author, not for black people, for gay people, and for all people. He was a black gay man, and he was on a television show in the 70s, and in America, and the guy said, "You know, you've really had your cross to bear, being black and gay." He said, "I think it's the most fabulous thing." So he embraced his.
It's a great, really.
But
good
his writing is.
So it was a conscious
fantastic.
lift from his collection of
yeah.
stories.
Yeah, and it was actually a documentary about that I gleaned the title from. A documentary about his collected works, The Price of the Ticket.
Okay.
And he was just saying, the price we all pay for the life we lead.
So the Costello collaboration finishes, and you then, am I right in saying you form another band?
No. Then there's quite a hiatus.
Right.
Of homework. Because I reached my brick wall of enthusiasm on the Elvis thing, and at that point, because Transvision Vamp, certainly in the beginning, was primarily written by Nick Sayer. I became more instrumental in the melodies of that as it went on, but I didn't write those songs completely myself. Obviously, Elvis wrote his ones, and I suddenly realized if I'm going to be as good as I hope and think I might be, then these songs actually have to start coming from me, which is great, but then you actually have to go away and learn how to play guitar, write many songs that aren't up to snuff, and go through the process of learning how to, I really did the thing backwards.
Quite strategic then, quite.
Well, I mean, you just can't. If you're going to be a songwriter, you can't just suddenly say, "Hey, I'm a
No,
songwriter."
quite, yeah.
You actually have to know.
But rather than say, "Well, quickly, I must find someone else I can get some songs."
No, because
done with.
I realised the joy in music had to be because I liked what I was doing. So, whereas most bands practice their guitar first and then get successful, I was successful first and then went back to my bedroom and practiced guitar.
Okay. Now, when you say you practice guitar, did you take up guitar for the first time, or had you already got the rudiment? Could you play C and G before, or?
I had a guitarist boyfriend who showed me a couple of bar chords, and
then you could play all of the Clash's back catalogue, of course. The moment you had those.
Oh, how well informed
So Wendy's
you are.
now giving me the Wendy James death stare.
Yeah, no, Mick, but Mick didn't Mick. I got very lucky with Mick. Mick's a very, very good man. Perfect boyfriend at that time in my life. Because there was nothing I.
This is Mick
Jones.
Jones you're talking about, of the pop group
The Clash.
The Clash, yeah. Sorry, just to keep listeners
And he was
abreast.
down there last night.
Was he?
And if I'd
Brilliant.
paced the gig more, or maybe had a couple more drinks, it's possible I could have tipped over into "I love you so much."
Oh,
But
brilliant.
I kept it short and to the point. But anyway, Mick's been there since.
He does seem like a very nurturing individual.
He's very generous with the gifts that he's learnt for himself, and also some of the what he can do. I mean, he won't financially invest in, if you go to him and go, Mick Jones, lend me some money.
Yeah.
But if you say, can I maybe work in your studio? Or he does what he can to help out the people he cares about.
He came across very well in that Viv Albertine book. I don't know whether you've read.
Isn't he fabulous in
Viv
that?
Albertine, he's just such a lovely, seems like such a lovely friend to have. So yeah.
Yeah, no, she was his girlfriend before me. I love the bit in her book because Viv Albertine from the Slits, I've just finished reading that book, and and she was an art student. Where were they? Kingston, Hammersmith
I think
Art
West London.
College.
Yeah.
And it was adjoined to the Carpentry Woodwork Technical College, right? But they shared a canteen, and so all the art students, obviously, they're wearing their floaty stuff and their hippie and whatever, their Vivienne Westwood, and all being super arty and really serious. But the canteen is shared with all the metalwork guys, and Viv describes brilliantly in one of these chapters. She'd been at college for a while and hadn't really bonded with anyone. She was thinking, I came to art college to really connect with people just like me. And then she looked across the school canteen, the college canteen, and she just describes this stick insect with leather trousers, high-heeled girls' slingbacks, and a mop of black New York doll hair. And she didn't even know if it was a boy or a girl, but it went into the bathrooms. And she said, whoever that is, that's the kind of person I want to be talking to. And then this thing came out of the lavatory and marched across the technical college canteen with all the builders going, wolf whistling, going, all right, love. And it was skinny little Mick in his high-heeled shoes. And he got his tray and got in the queue behind Viv for their slurp at the canteen food and went, my name's Mick Jones. Oh, they were just so like him. I mean, he's a very polite, soft-spoken gentleman. It's fabulous to think of him tottering across the canteen in his high heels.
Yeah.
But that was the New York Dolls, right? They all had a bit of a fancy for ladies' attire.
So.
Yes, sorry, I went off on one.
No, that was brilliant. That was a nice one. So Mick taught you guitar.
He didn't teach me.
He showed you a few.
If there were questions, he'd answer them. But basically, he said one thing to me, which is find your own voice. And so that was the basis of me hiding away in West London and just starting to work. And Mick was just there for encouragement, really.
So this would have been through the 90s?
Yeah.
Until, when are we saying? Because at some point you form another band.
Right, so up to 2000, because we all celebrated the turn of the century down at the Thames. And then a year later, which is 9/11, right?
2001, that's right.
Mick and I parted, and I sold my house and packed my bags and moved to America.
Wow.
And started the demo tape I'd made in London. I took with me, and I ended up in Sonic Youth Studio in New Jersey and started recording the demos from London. And that's Racine. Now, did Racine have a fixed lineup? I was never sure. Not particularly. My concept was that people get like this. I had been so famous as Wendy James for a little while. I wanted to, that and the fact that when you're from West London, band names are cooler than solo singer-songwriters.
Yes. Yeah.
I wanted to call it Racine.
Not just West London, I think it's just general, isn't it? Mick Hucknall would probably, have something to say about that, wouldn't he?
I don't know what you'd have to say.
Well, I'm just thinking, Simply Red is effectively just him, isn't it?
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So Racine was just a floating name for whoever I decided to work with. But it kind of was a failed experiment because when we went on the road, they would just fly poster it as Wendy James's new band anyway. So I didn't get to have any of the anonymity that I thought I might. So Racine was me and whoever I was working with, yeah.
So it's kind of like it was that similar. I had someone on the show a couple of weeks ago. And we were talking about Tin Machine and the similar problems faced by David Bowie trying to do his group thing, and how it was just a non-starter.
Yeah, it's very difficult once and in the end self-defeating, because your name is the thing that people are attracted to. So why not own it? But you do go through a stage where you think, I need a break from that name.
Yes, yeah, and there's some good tunes came out of that.
Material.
Yeah,
I mean that's when I do start coming alive, really, where I start sounding like myself.
Then towards the end of I'm just trying to catch up to where we are now.
Sorry.
Chronology. You then make a record under your own name. I Came Here to Blow Minds.
Yeah.
Now that was 2010, was that? Or
Yeah, it's only a couple of years ago, 4
Yeah.
years ago.
Which has got
Recorded in Paris with French musicians at a clothing label owner's design studio that he'd built a recording studio in. It's clothes that I'm sure you all know, APC, those jeans.
Yes.
So Jean I'd known for, because when I was doing the Elvis Costello thing, I wanted to knock up some ideas of my own, and Jean lent me his studio in Paris at that time. So I didn't have much money when I came Here to Blow Minds, and I couldn't be bothered to go to record labels to ask for it. So I just asked Jean if he still had his little studio in the bottom of the APC design building. And he did, and it was empty. And then I just said, you must know some good French Paris indie players. Put me in touch with them. And he did, and the whole thing just was great. I'm really impressed by the French pop indie scene. There is really quite a scene there. And amazing players, they have a tough time because the French language is not the first language of rock and roll, but they know their Television and their New York Dolls and their, Talking Heads or their Sex Pistols or whatever, as much as we English or Americans do.
No, absolutely.
But it's just, and they also have that added thing that we don't. What English pop is its own sound, but French pop is. French pop is its own sound as well. They're informed by Serge Gainsbourg and other. That the yeah girls in the 60s.
Well, also, obviously, the French dance scene was very... That people like Sebastian and those people on the... it's a fantastic label who have the most amazing sleeves.
Yes,
because
music,
absolutely, because, and they have another kind of various other sort of offshoots, but absolutely,
And
always great and always so stylish.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. So the French have an added element that is rather attractive, to people that like writing pop songs. So the whole thing just miraculously came together, and I met a really great guitarist, and he pulled in a bass player and a drummer, and we spent 5 weeks recording it. And some of those tunes are my favourite tunes on that album. And a lot of the people that follow me now have been born into this through that album. It's a healthy mix of old Transvision and a few new discoveries.
Now, you didn't use that lineup on this album, though.
No, there was no need to. I'd done that.
So you're living in New York.
Yeah.
In the East Village.
Yeah.
Am I right? And tell us the story. What happened?
I Facebook met James Williamson.
Okay.
The guitarist from the Stooges, from Iggy and the Stooges, the one that wrote Raw Power. Because for those that don't know, there are two guitarists from the Stooges. There's Circa the Stooges with Ron Ashton. And then they weren't really doing... They were obviously revolutionary and my favourite band, and those first two Stooges albums are my favourites. But they weren't necessarily having hits per se, and so at that time I think they became.
No, they were a disaster commercially, weren't they? Yeah.
They were then picked up by Elton John's music. I can't remember the name of his management company, but they were picked up.
I didn't know that. Okay.
They were picked up by Elton John's management company. I think orchestrated by Danny Fields, and Iggy was sent to London to, write a new album. They stayed round at Hyde Park, and he brought James Williamson, who was also a guitarist lurking around the Ann Arbor, Detroit area, and they started off working with English musicians, and being the kind of straightforward Americans they really are. I mean, Iggy's fabulous, but they also come from Detroit, so they're quite tough. And they thought that the English musicians were really a bit limp-wristed. And so then they got Ron and his brother Scott Rock Ashton over to London, and that's what formed Iggy and the Stooges. And James and Iggy wrote Raw Power. And so, and I'd from Nick from Transvision Vamp had always drummed James Williamson's name into my head. Oh, he's my favourite guitarist in the world, ever, ever, ever. Some people are really nuts for James Williamson. And then I saw this James Williamson comment, as you do on Facebook, like, is that the James Williamson?
You might, Wendy. We don't that often.
He's out there.
Yeah, no, it happens.
And so I wrote to, I said, hey, I think I added him. And then one Christmas he said, Merry Christmas, Wendy. And then we started talking, and again, this is so typical of my life. He said, come to California and let's try a couple of tunes. So I said, okay. And at the same time in New York, I'd met James Sclavunos, who's the drummer from the Bad Seeds and Grinder Man. He'd also done time in the Cramps. He's quite a legendary drummer.
Yes.
Come up in the second wave of the CBGB's bands. And James and I really connected and had agreed at some point there's going to have to be something where we can work together. And so when James Williamson said, come to California, my initial thought was, I'm going to get Scott Ashton, and that's basically Wendy and the Stooges. But Scott...
Did you actually think that as a sentence?
Cool.
Wendy
I
and the
think I even verbally expressed it.
Did you start designing logos?
But Scott had back trouble. No, I didn't get that far. Scott had some back issues at that time, and so he couldn't be the drummer. And then the light bulb went in my head. Perfect moment for Sclavunos to come in. So Jim and I met at JFK, flew out to Northern Berkeley, California, worked with Williamson on 2 of the tracks which are on this new album. Then James which worked out fantastically, and it was great working with James.
Which ones were those? Which songs?
We did 2 covers. We did a cover of Bob Dylan's "It's All Right, Ma," and also one of my favourite bands, Patti Smith's sadly deceased husband, not MC5, but his band after the MC5, Sonic's Rendezvous Band, which is Fred Sonic Smith's amazing band that lasted about 15 months. After the MC5, and some of the song, I mean, you can only really hear bootlegs. They only made it into the studio for one single, which is the same song on both sides.
What's the name of the song for the listeners to look up?
Keep On Hustling.
Keep On Hustling.
I'm pretty sure.
We're looking it up now. Max is on
me,
the wheels of steel.
I think I'm wrong. Keep On Hustling. Okay.
What's the name of the band? Well, Max looks it up again.
Sonic's Rendezvous Band.
Sonic's Rendezvous Band.
And he is Fred Sonic Smith from the MC5.
I'd never heard of that after the MC5. I've never heard of that.
It's really bugging me now. It's not Keep On Hustling. It's tell me quickly before I.
It's Fred Sonic Smith. And his band
the engineer's texting me on that session, so I could ask him.
Yeah, you could ask him. We could have live texting. If you know out there, and we don't find out during this podcast, it's podcast@tunetribe.com. Tell us what the name of the one single released by Fred Sonic Smith after the MC5 split.
Well, let me just bring up my iTunes. Anyway, keep talking. So the thing is. So, but then James was going on a world tour with Iggy and the Stooges to do Raw Power.
No, that's MC5.
So put in Sonic's Rendezvous Band. City Slang. Thank you,
City Slang.
Thank you. There you go.
Thank you, William. Yeah. And, of course, inspired a whole record label.
Yeah, that's right. Really good record label.
Yeah. Interesting.
So
I had no idea. That's really nice to learn something like that.
James Sclavunos and I said, well, we're going to do the whole album. James Williamson can't do it. I phoned up Glen Matlock, who's one of my old friends, obviously from West London, and said, I need a bass player.
He's been on the show. Lovely man.
Yeah. Good man, Glenn.
Yeah.
And he said, cool, sure, just let me know when. And then I started to meet engineers in New York City, and I said, I still haven't found the guitarist for the whole album. And then, well, why don't you call up Lenny Kaye? He just lives 2 streets across. And some fireworks went off in my head, because as much as I love the Stooges as my favourite band, Lenny's playing and Patty's performance of... I mean, there's great footage of them whenever they were over here to do the old grey whistle test.
I mean, it's well documented that you're a huge Patti Smith fan, right? I mean, probably...
from the right get-go. But there's a song called Rock and Roll Nigger, and Lenny's playing on that, and also her first single, Piss Factory.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. And so Lenny was everything to me. As iconic as the Stooges are, Lenny was and is my favourite guitarist, apart from Fred Sonic Smith, who's dead, and Ron Ashton, who's also dead.
Yeah.
So I just thought, oh my God.
So your favourite guitarist who's still alive,
calling
basically.
Lenny. No, Lenny's number 1 anyway.
Okay.
So I was given his cell phone number, and I said, hi Lenny, my name is Wendy James. And he went, I know who you are. And
don't call me again.
And we agreed to meet in a coffee shop, and I walked down the road, and I met him there, and our mutual admiration of Fred Sonic Smith was what bonded us, and obviously it's Patty's husband as well. And in fact, Lenny he introduced the 2 of them, because he'd been moonlighting a couple of times with Sonic Rendezvous. Anyway, blah blah blah. I know too much.
So the lineup is there now.
Yeah.
You've got the lineup.
Sorry, thanks for speeding me up.
No, you sped yourself up.
No, and so yes, Lenny fell into place, Glenn, Jim. We had already had the 2 tracks done with James Williamson. So I set about booking the songs were written. I demoed them up myself, which is not a demo, it's a guide. It's just me singing and playing guitar onto MP3. Sent it out to all the guys. They learnt them as much as they could in advance. I booked a studio and off we went. Did
you book a studio? Did you do rehearsals first? Did you kind of like rehearse up? Because the arrangements, some of the arrangements are really interesting.
All right there in the studio.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we are just all such seasoned musicians by this point that no one's got ego problems. No one has to have emotional breakdowns. Everyone puts music first. And if you're going to commit to 12 hours in the studio, the whole point of being there is to push yourself to be the best you can and discover stuff. So that's what we did, and it was just glorious.
How long were you in the studio together?
5 weeks.
Okay, so reasonable time.
And
where was it? Where did you do it?
That was in New York City. Oh, where?
Which studio? Do you, was it like a studio that listeners might have heard of, or wasn't
No, it was a medium-priced,
Yeah.
Lower East Side thing, and
Okay.
I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah.
It's on the back of the album.
Yeah. Okay. Which sadly we don't
And the
have.
credits.
We don't
Sorry,
have it
I
here,
forgot
but
to
we are
bring
going to.
them.
We're nonetheless
Yeah.
we're going to talk about the package in a bit.
And then
afterwards.
I took it back to the studio that I'd done the James Williamson stuff in Berkeley, which is a studio called Fantasy Studios, which was Creedence Clearwater Revival's first investment off their first hit, and then became the Saul Zaentz Media Center. And he's dead now also, but a huge producer of movies. But the little recording studio, well, it's not little, it's one of those wonderful, enormous ones.
Yeah.
With an enormous live room and caves and great acoustics and brilliant outboard gear, from the most high-end digital right through to really collectible analog stuff.
Wow.
And so I went back there because I'd only been in a kind of mid-level studio to record, which is fine with those musicians because they got the best amps and they know what they're doing. You just need a clean delivery of what you're getting down. But to add some of that magic, I took it back to Fantasy to get to be mixed.
To get it mixed. Okay. Well, it sounds really good, and some of it, it's just it's uncanny the way that it sounds, kind of timeless. The songs are really strong, but it's kind of got for me, for the listener who is kind of familiar with some of the if not all of the artists that you're mentioning, and plus that period of the, what we're talking,
that's
sort
what
of,
turns me on,
new wave,
that
punk, that kind of that whole New York CBGB scene. It's got that feel to it. I mean, there's one song which I've just written. I've done some, as I was listening to it over the last couple of days, done some notes, and there's one that is it Good Deeds with Bad Intentions, or Bad Intentions with
Bad Intentions and a Bit of Cruelty?
Bad Intentions and a Bit of Cruelty. It's 1978. It's, you're taken right back to 1978. And Matlock's bass playing is just so distinctive. He's just such a melodic.
On the outro, it's pure Sex Pistols, isn't it?
Yeah, really, really good. And I'm actually surprised that you say that you didn't do arrangements, because there's some of the arrangements, just the multi-tracked vocals that you do on Cowboy Rhythm, for example.
That's one of my specialties. Once I'm in a recording mode, is backing vocals. I love Burt Bacharach style layering up of harmony, and triple tracking harmonies, and Phil Spector basically.
But it doesn't sound too lush. It still sounds like a 4-piece band just in a studio playing it live, effectively.
I love finding those melodies. That's one of my actual talents, is melody. I mean, I'm actually quite good at that. So that's what I do.
So it was recorded about 2 years ago, is that right? It was a couple of years ago, and it came out digitally.
No.
Or have I got my wires crossed here?
No, I did a 7-inch single.
Okay.
Which was Bad Intentions and backed with Indigent Blues, which is a great pop
and
song.
Indigent Blues is the current single,
Yeah.
which we're hearing occasionally on Six Music. They're playing it, and I believe.
Yes, that's right.
Yes.
And rather a wonderful kind of innocent-sounding English pop song. Yeah,
and your voice it's funny because your voice on a number of songs, you've got a real kind of pure. There's no huskiness or attitude or punk thing going on. It's actually quite a pure, almost.
I can go quite Dionne Warwick if I want to.
You can, and you do.
I do. I love a pure, perfectly pitched, singing girl voice.
Yes.
Which could be the Supremes, or it could be any girl group. I just
There's
love.
one like Farewell to Love. I thought it was just a total kind of doo-wop style, mid-tempo, sort of there's no sort of like edge or angle to it. But some of the songs, you kind of go into this slightly darker persona. It's almost as if it's kind of you adopt a character in some of the songs. I'm thinking King Rat.
Well, I love the movies.
I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you, is the lyric.
Well, that's a line from any good old movie,
yeah,
isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Any spy kind of thing. If I tell you this, we will have to kill you. So that, I mean...
I'm glad you don't do it in that...
We have ways. But, I just... I love language, right? Whether it's my literary authors or really brilliant script writers, or just people walking down the street in their own particular, lilt of wherever they come from. And my ears pick up on language, and I find language, when it's done properly, is just so evocative and poetic, and it takes you to the place, and it gives you the character. It's not like I'm being another character, but if you listen to some Jay-Z, you want to walk down Broadway. You're
already doing
hustling.
You're already doing the shoulder thing going on. Yeah. No,
so music takes you to that place. And please.
Can I ask you about the song "You're a Dirt Bomb," Lester? Because it fascinates me, this song, because it's got and I just have to, again, a great lyric about you're lying on your bed. There's some new wave rockers, graffiti. There's mentions of Gramercy. And it's 2 chords. There's 2 chords in this, and it's kind of relentless 2 chords.
Well, I'm a Lou Reed fan as well, you see, primarily.
It's very New York sounding.
I think Lou is the perfect songwriter.
But then there's this this chorus comes in, and it's kind of almost like a sort of an island in the middle of this sort of sea of 2 chords, and the island appears, and you mentioned you're a dirt bomb, Lester, and then you're back into this kind of relentless thing. And then you go into this almost like a kind of potted history of America or something. There's lyrically
and the world from Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
British Isles.
So who's Lester? What's the thing, or is it?
Okay, well, Lester is Lester Bangs.
Right. Okay.
The iconic rock and roll journalist. who people like James Williamson and Mick and Lenny, you know, they all knew him.
Yes.
I never met him, but I've loved some of the journalism he's
Some
done.
listeners might be familiar with the character as featured in the Cameron Crowe movie.
Right, that was based on Lester, wasn't it?
Yeah, the journalist was based on Lester Bangs.
He's a real filthy dirtbag.
And a huge MC5 fan, right?
yeah.
Wasn't he? Yeah.
But a really brilliant rock and roll
Almost
journalist.
Famous is the movie I'm thinking of, by the
Yes.
way, yeah.
And so that's just a rite of passage that when you're starting to do your ABC of rock and roll, you start reading some Lester Bangs critiques. And but there was a period in my life where I went and lived in the Gramercy Park Hotel for 3 months, and now it's, you know, super posh for downtown. But back in the day, it was a flea pit for errant musicians. So that was like, oh, I'll stay there. And I did stay there, and it's slap bang in the middle of downtown, and you do end up walking through Union Square and imagining, this is where Andy Warhol's first factory was, and now I'm on the Bowery, and oh my God, look, there's CBGB, and there's the Mercer Street Arts Club, which is where the New York Dolls and Suicides are. And suddenly, if you're into what I'm into, you're literally walking. I suppose it's the same if you're into Napoleon, right? You can walk around Paris and think, ooh, Napoleon was here. Which I do that also, by the way. But so New York was a.
No, I do that in New York as well. I mean, not the Napoleon thing, but the CBGB's
just
thing.
Infects you.
Oh yeah.
And so that time was just so gloriously down and dirty, and immersing myself in my imagination. You know, coming from the way back the English countryside, suddenly to be on the Bowery.
A contrast with Lewis.
Right.
And that record shop.
And it's not just the musicians, but I mean the Mark Rothko, the painter, all the Jackson Pollock, all these guys were East Village, Bowery based. Yeah. Mark Twain, going way back in time, one of the great American authors, lived 1 block away from where I ended up living, and you just suddenly. Eleanor Roosevelt lived in the next street.
And, of course, movie makers as well.
Yeah, so you just suddenly, you feel like they're in you. And the energy is just getting passed on. And when I'm gone, maybe someone will pick up on, you know, it's just, I love it. And what was the question? Oh,
so the question was,
so
it was a history lesson you've got going on, because you mentioned Columbus. Yeah. And you mentioned I'm not even sure whether you mentioned the founding fathers or
Civil War buff.
Okay, well there you go.
And more than anyone, there are 2 people I wish I'd met in life. If one had a time machine, and one would have been Hunter Thompson, because I'd definitely have liked to spend time with him. And because brilliant man.
I'm just frightened of what's in his in the trunk though. In that Fear and Loathing.
Embrace it, darling.
Okay.
And Abraham Lincoln.
Okay.
Oh, I love Abraham. I do.
I like the way that you just refer to him as his first name though. I love Abe.
I mean. That was one of his magic powers as president, actually, as most people did think of him in first name.
Yeah.
You know, he was so important to their much like Winston Churchill, I suppose, during our war years. But anyway, so yes, I like my history. I like Mark Twain as an author. I tend to read a lot of American history. And it just struck me that whether it's Abraham Lincoln giving the Gettysburg Address, or whether it's Bob Dylan singing The Times They Are Changing, or whether it's... Gosh, let me think of another good example. But that same thread of Nina Simone, you know. So I'm just that thread of, and it could be the guy that invented the internet. There's a thread of genius that is so pure and well-meaning that that's what keeps us generation after generation inspired and trying to find it for ourselves. And it could, so there's not much difference between Abe doing a good speech and Bob Dylan doing a good speech. You know, these people change our lives.
And the album closes with your take on "It's All Right, Ma."
Yeah.
In fact, I think you just call it "It's All Right, Ma,"
Bob's
rather than the
It's
full
All Right, Ma.
title.
Yeah. His is I'm Only Bleeding.
I'm Only Bleeding, yeah.
But I just shortened it to It's All Right, Ma.
And if I might say, the delivery of the best line of the song, even the President of the United States.
Sometimes must have to stand naked.
You do it so well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Wendy, can I ask you now
Yes.
to think about something that you could recommend? Because we're rapidly reaching the time when we have to stop, and you probably have to get some sleep because you've got another show tomorrow, right? You're going.
Yes, I'm off to Ramsgate Music Hall.
Ramsgate, not a million miles away from where you grew up, or am I?
I don't know my geography.
Oh, really? So history good, geography less good. Okay.
No.
So yeah,
I don't know where I am.
is there something that Tune Tribe listeners who are currently listening to this, you could recommend that would improve their lives, that's improved yours in the last few weeks? Now, in the past, we've had people recommending Marks and Spencer's custard pies.
I think I can go a bit deeper than that.
Yeah, I think you can. But I don't mind if you keep it, want to keep it shallow. That's all right too.
People are always, one is expected if you're a musician to, only be reading about other musicians to get inspiration. But to really keep going in the music business or in any art, you really have to have that inner core of self-belief and also generosity toward the people around you. And, to project onto them the encouragement so that in turn you help them and in turn they help you. And all for one and one for all, team of, being a team and all that, team player. And so without sounding, it's not too, I got great pleasure from reading Doris Kearns Goodwin's book, A Team of Rivals.
Okay.
Which is about Abraham Lincoln. And that's primarily the book that the movie Lincoln was based on. But it's about how he purposefully made his cabinet up from the people that were his rivals to be president, some of whom very much didn't agree with his policies, but they were nonetheless good, honest, upright men with differing views. So he purposefully had a cabinet made of people that would always question him and pose, an opposite.
Rather than a team of yes men.
Exactly. And it's just how Lincoln not only navigates the politics, literally the inner politics of his own cabinet, but also a country that endures such huge amounts of death on both sides, the Confederates and the Unionists, and all with this one goal of preserving the Union as the Founding Fathers originally had seen it, a united America, and to bring the secessionists back into the fold and taking the fight to the point of making it a union again. And so much blood spilt, so much death, but Abraham's ability to keep a nation together through such adversity not only makes you adore him, the intelligent, wily, brilliant politician that he is, but also the truly human, considerate and individual for one-on-one, whether it's someone's whose son has been lost on the opposite side or whether it's speaking to a whole nation. Just
When was the book written? Is it
I guess it was written about 4 years ago.
Okay, so it's a
And then Spielberg turned it into the movie. And she's one of the great writers, Doris Kearns Goodwin. She's done it on the Roosevelt. She's done it on Lyndon Johnson, who's another favourite of mine. And
so she's almost like a sort of American version of Lady Antonia Fraser, that sort of highbrow writer documenting.
Yeah, but
her
it's
own
really
nation.
it's really factual. I don't know. Does Antonia Fraser put in a bit of fiction, or is she completely historic?
She is historic. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I know her son actually.
Yeah. Harold was married to Harold Pinter.
Yeah,
she
I
was,
know.
yeah,
I know.
yeah,
I know.
yeah.
And
That
but
sounds-
anyway,
so what's the name of the book again?
A Team of Rivals.
A Team of Rivals.
So it's a bit of a tome. But it's well worth it, and you learn something, but you also get inspired.
That sounds great. Now, what next for Wendy James? You've got the tour. Are you
which
going?
I'm hoping will, continue to gather momentum.
Yes.
And continue throughout the year. And then I'm going to go. I've got a flat in Paris. I'm going to go there for a little while.
Now, you were saying earlier you're undecided now about where to live.
Don't know where I belong any longer.
Well, I mean, clearly everywhere, but it's about deciding on.
I've done 15 years in New York, but
Yeah.
to launch this record, I rented a place in Paris, and I kind of got into the Paris thing. I don't know where I'm going to end up.
It sounds like
Probably in a recording studio on the road, right? I'm a gypsy.
It sounds like you've got friends everywhere, though. I'm liking the fact that you recorded an album at the bloke who owns APC Clothes studio.
Well, that's one of the benefits of
I'm glad it wasn't Diesel or one of the lesser brands. So no offence, Diesel, but APC. Come on.
Yeah, and he doesn't really give out discounts either, so I didn't get much swag.
Did you not?
No. No. Well, people don't get rich by mistake, do they?
No, I'm too frightened to go to the shop. Is it in Westbourne, just off Westbourne Grove? I think the shop.
Yeah, I think there are a few around. There's one in Shoreditch as well.
Of course.
Anyway, but yeah, that's one of the wonderful benefits of being in a band that has a certain amount. You do get to go around the world, and you do make friends.
I need to ask you a question. Then the thing that I was going to ask you, lastly, before you go, because we've done this slightly, because we haven't got a copy of the record, which I must get, and I must try and ask you to sign one for me. That'd be amazing.
Get one over to you.
But the cover is very striking. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that? Because we'll probably use a pack shot of it to promote the podcast. So you might want to tell us a little bit about.
That's a very beautiful shot
It's
of
an amazing shot.
Topless, lying down on a squashy sofa.
Yes.
In my girlfriend's flat.
Upside down, kind of.
Well,
so, yeah.
If I lie in a certain angle, then my body is pretty still great.
I mean, I'm skirting around the issue of saying that sentence, without sounding.
Well, all girls know if you lie, if you lie. Exactly.
Is that a thing? I didn't even know that was a thing. Did you know that, Max? You know about lying at a certain
sitting on the lavatory, not such a good look.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to have that. Maybe that's the next album cover. I don't know.
I don't think so. But it's a beautiful and
amazing shot.
And Kim, the girl that did it, she's an Australian, and we'd had a couple of beers, and Australians, they're quite matter of fact. She went, Wendy, just take your top off.
Get your kid off, Wendy. Come on.
And we were having a laugh, and FUCK it, and that's what I did, and it looked beautiful, and I don't have a problem with it really.
It's a very I can't think of another album cover that has that nudity on it, apart from maybe Two Virgins, Lennon and Yoko.
Right, because I'm not being purposefully provocative. I'm not pouting at the camera, and I'm not particularly being sexual. I'm literally just lying there. And it's almost like you're a voyeur of my own moment.
Yeah.
And so therefore it's far more akin to art nudes, I think, rather than pop flirty nudes.
But it is genuinely art as opposed to an art shot in the kind of traditional sort of euphemistic sense.
No. It's more like if you were posing for a sculptor, a sculptor to sculpt you.
Yes.
Or a painter to paint you.
Yes.
Yeah, so I did that, and it meant that I didn't have to have makeup artists, and I didn't have to worry about what I was wearing, and it was just, everything was done within 45 minutes.
It's a really good, really nifty bit
and
of design.
And why, what the hell? And just if I may, you can take this out, but we're living in a climate where, on one extreme, women are getting more and more slutty in their selling of things. The Kardashian kind of bent of things.
Yes.
I quite like the Kardashians, but they do.
The sort of air punching.
It's
going
definitely boobs out and whatever it is. It's pretty. And then on the other extreme, over in the Middle East, there's a fervent desire to reintroduce Sharia law, where women would only have their eyes through a slit. So I think it's quite healthy for us Westerners females that is, to own our bodies, and by no means be the object of men's manipulation, but to own our own bodies, because, you take your top off in the summertime when it's hot.
How do you know?
Well, you as in all men.
Yes.
And it's very sexist for you to then think that
absolutely,
a woman's breasts are taboo and yours aren't, because So I have no problem with any of it, and I can back it up with an argument.
And you have done. And I like the fact also it makes a comment on people's preconception of the Wendy James of Transvision Vamp as well, and the fact that you're kind of taking the ownership of the previous
that was more flirty
image.
Teenage, I want to look pretty, which is a natural way a teenager should be. But now it's just like I am what I am.
You are what you are.
Yeah.
Wendy, what a pleasure. What a pleasure and a privilege to have you on the show. I would say come back, and I will say come back.
Please.
Come back in a year's time after the tour, and we'll talk about the album and how it's gone, because it really deserves to do brilliantly, because it's a strong record.
I gave it a lot.
And it's good to have you back.
Thank you
Wendy
very
James,
much.
thanks very much.
Thank you.
Contact us via email at podcast@tunetribe.com and follow us on Twitter @tunetribe for exclusive competitions and updates.